Good morning, y'all. Josh's Severe Weather. And yes, good morning. Every morning is a good morning. It's another day for us to live and to serve and to embrace one another. So, anyway, I am going to get to the weather upcoming here the next couple of days. This is going to be a short-term video discussing the major storm impacting the central and eastern United States. We're not going to really get into any long-term today. I'll have more on that once we get this storm out of our hair here by the weekend. So I'm going to share my screen with you here and go into what is going on. And I'm primarily going to be focusing my video today on the threat for severe weather. We are starting to see some active weather across parts of the central and southern United States this morning, even before daybreak, with a potent storm system expected to track along the Ohio River Valley along the Ohio River this morning and then track into the eastern Great Lakes and into the Lake Ontario and Southeast Canada region tonight into tomorrow. The storm system's going to be strengthening. It's going to bring a lot of mild air. It's going to feel kind of like spring out there today across the southeast and along the east coast. And with that warm air and with the humidity that comes out of the Gulf, we do see the threat for severe weather increasing with an enhanced risk for severe weather over portions of Alabama and Georgia. A second low will form tomorrow along the southeast coast and track up into the mild waters of the Atlantic Ocean, and that'll be driven by an upper level storm system, which will dig southeastward. And that could produce some interesting weather across coastal New England as we get into the weekend. I'll get into that in just a second. Here's our current radar from perryweather.com. Let me zoom in for you so you can see that. And this is the full screen, and you guys can see a pretty dynamic storm system with a lot of lightning strikes over the past couple of hours. We have a severe thunderstorm watch here across western and central Kentucky, a threat for some severe weather with a couple of Boeing echoes moving along and just to the south of the Ohio River towards Owensboro and Louisville. The low pressure storm track right now is south and east of St. Louis. We have thunderstorms wrapping around behind the surface low and enough cold air aloft to drive some snow south of Kansas City into eastern and southeastern parts of Kansas, where we do have a winter weather advisory in effect. Also, a high wind watch in effect for parts of central and eastern Kansas, Oklahoma, and down into the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. On the tail end of this storm, not really any severe weather, but we do have a lot of lightning strikes moving in through the Ark-La-Miss region, and that'll be impacting you in Vicksburg and Jackson, Mississippi this morning, and up into western and middle Tennessee as we get later into the morning hours. As I record this video, it's about 5 a.m. Central Time. Yes, I get up kind of early, but notice that this line of storms is advancing slowly eastward, and I think the speed of the storm track may intensify and it may speed up a little bit due to the upper level winds that I'm going to show you in a little bit. Farther east, we do have winter weather advisories out for the central Appalachians as cold air plows in behind our storm system tonight and tomorrow morning. We'll see snow in the higher elevations. I'm going to get into amounts of that as well. We do have the risk for some locally strong winds on the lakes here in South Carolina and Georgia. That's a lake wind advisory. And then farther to the north and east, there is a wintry side of this storm. Believe it or not, it is January, so winter's still there. We do have winter weather or winter storm watches and warnings out for parts of New England and upstate New York, where the cold part of the storm is producing some snow right now. It'll eventually go to rain in many of these places, but could be some freezing rain for a brief amount of time in northern Maine and in southeastern Quebec. But this will primarily be a snowstorm with significant snow falling in Ottawa and Montreal, Quebec, and up into, I don't remember the name of the peninsula north of New Brunswick, but I think it's the St. Lawrence or something. I'll brush up on my geography later. How's that sound? So anyway, this is a current look at what's going on here. I will come back to this in a little bit. So let me escape. Let's take a look at the 500 millibar chart from the GFS. These are the upper level system, the upper level pattern, the upper level heights at about 15 to 30,000 feet aloft. You can see a pretty sharp upper level low here across Oklahoma this morning. And that is going to actually drop southeastward into western Tennessee this afternoon. The fact that it is kind of intensifying, you see the lines are tightening up, shows that we have a strengthening upper level pattern. And the reason why is it's getting a little bit of energy from the southern parts of the jet stream here. So the subtropical jet, here's the polar jet up in here, and you can see there's a trough digging back across Lake Superior. These two are not going to phase, which means we're not going to have a big East Coast storm. If we get this phasing with this, what it'll do is slow things down and give you a negatively tilted storm. That's when we get our big East Coast storms. However, these two don't really come together. You can see there's a second piece behind the first piece. So 1, 2 here. What'll happen is this first piece of energy will take our low pressure system and move it quickly northeast. The second piece will linger a little bit behind into Georgia and South Carolina tomorrow evening, and that'll produce low pressure. But it looks like, due to the fact that this ridge behind it is advancing pretty quickly because of that Pacific jet. We've talked about the Pineapple Express, the atmospheric river. What's happening is this ridge is building in so quickly that it's going to have to push this upper low off the coast on Saturday, and that is not the position we like to see for a huge East Coast storm. The fact that it's centered over the Outer Banks Saturday morning and midday rather than over Columbia, South Carolina, and Charlotte means this is going to be what could have been as far as winter weather here for the East Coast. So we're just out of phase a little bit too much here. For a big winter storm, what we want to see is a ridge kind of like this, and then the upper level winds kind of veering back into the deep south and into this region where you've got more of a ridge in place and more blocking here across eastern Canada. We don't have a strong block. We do have a strong upper level low. But because the block is not there, what'll happen is this upper low is going to advance and kick off the coast rather than come up the coast. So it's out of here, and we're already warming back up on Sunday and Monday behind our storm. The next piece of energy comes through the Ohio Valley on Tuesday. It's not going to be as strong, so this isn't going to be really a big winter weather maker unless you're up, of course, in the Great Lakes. And then yet another assault of a Pacific trough, another big storm moving in early next week to the southwest. That is going to actually lift north and east and take a more northwesterly track than this storm around this time next week. So we have a big ridge of high pressure here, sorry about that, in the eastern United States, which does not favor winter weather, unfortunately. It favors a big rainstorm. The next piece of energy drops back into the southwest next weekend. We still have some ridging here in the east, so once again, we don't really have a threat for cold weather, but there's some more promise coming behind that around the following week of the 23rd. I'm not going to spend much time on that. We'll talk more about it after this storm leaves. Not that I don't care. It's just not a priority at this point. All right, so let's look at 850 millibar winds. This is where we look for the kind of energy that can produce severe weather. As we see the upper low digging down into the mid-Mississippi and lower Ohio Valley this morning, we see intensifying winds coming out of the southwest over Alabama, Georgia, eastern Tennessee, and Kentucky. If these winds were more out of the south, we would have more directional wind shear and more of a threat for tornadoes. But because they're out of the southwest and the surface flow is kind of southwesterly, I don't think we're talking a major tornado outbreak at this point, but we are likely to see some powerful winds. And I would not be shocked to see widespread severe weather this afternoon across Alabama, Georgia, maybe southeast Tennessee, and eventually into upstate South Carolina. Mostly straight line winds, not to say there couldn't be a tornado warning or two, but this is mostly looking like a major wind event across the southeast. Not that we're not going to see more tornado warnings as the month wears on, because I think that's definitely possible, but there's not enough directional wind shear here to give us widespread tornadoes and the kind of storms we saw last week and then back in the end of December. But nonetheless, a strengthening low-level jet, which is going to bring transport of very mild air for this time of the year all the way up the East Coast tonight into tomorrow morning. And then you guys can see kind of a second piece of energy lags behind on Friday afternoon and evening. And with a bit of a deadness here in the trough, we see very strong transport out ahead of it. We'll see another low-pressure system form in here and kind of track up the East Coast and maybe brush eastern New England and Cape Cod over the end of the weekend. Here's a surface map, and you guys can see our low pressure system tracks right along the Ohio River and into western Pennsylvania late today. Not going to be a very heavy rain event, but there will be stronger storms and severe winds likely here this afternoon and evening. Notice on the cold side, we do have snow, kind of some wet snow coming quickly here this morning across Missouri, and then that winds down very quickly as our surface low continues to spread northeast into colder air in New England, where we have freezing rain and snow. This will continue to produce some rain and maybe some thunderstorms down across Florida overnight into tomorrow morning. At that point, though, the fact that the surface low is all the way up here and we have a second low forming, most of the severe weather looks like it's going to be off the coast. But we could see a brief round of some stronger storms overnight tonight over eastern parts of North Carolina and maybe into Myrtle Beach as well, maybe a second little area of severe weather. Behind it with the trough here, we will see another low pressure system form off the coast. It's not going to be lining, the moisture's not going to be there though yet. So the snow that I expect to fall tonight and tomorrow morning across the Appalachians is going to struggle to make it farther east. And places east of Asheville and Hickory, North Carolina, are likely not going to be dealing with anything but a few sprinkles during the day tomorrow. The GFS does show enough instability and enough cold air aloft that maybe a few flakes can mix in here over eastern parts of North Carolina, maybe even central North Carolina late tomorrow night, but probably not the kind that are going to really stick to anything. We'll have to keep an eye on this as it's kind of an outlier solution, but with the next low forming and a little bit of moisture and instability left over very early Saturday morning, about 3, 4, 5 a.m., there may be the potential to see some snowflakes in places like Greenville and Clinton, North Carolina, maybe even to Elizabeth City by early in the day on Saturday, maybe as you're waking up Saturday morning. But really, the storm is moving out. It may buckle back into the coast and produce some light snow over the islands and Cape Cod here Sunday morning, and then spreading back into Maine and probably fizzling as we get to Sunday night, Monday morning. But we'll watch Eastern Canada for some wintry weather as this low could wrap in. The Storm Prediction Center does have a severe thunderstorm watch in western and central Kentucky. It's monitoring for a potential severe thunderstorm watch here this morning over central and northeast Louisiana, as well as central Mississippi. We may see a brief tornado threat as well. I think this would be a severe thunderstorm watch, not a tornado watch, but we'll have to watch. You guys can see from their analysis, though, the winds aloft and the surface winds do not differ enough for there to be widespread tornadoes. There's a little bit of a difference in the wind direction between the ground and up. You have southwest at the ground and west-southwest up, but not enough bulk wind shear to produce a widespread severe weather event with tornadoes, more likely strong winds. As we get, though, later into the day, the chance for severe weather should start picking up this afternoon across central and eastern Alabama. That puts Birmingham and Montgomery in the enhanced risk for severe weather this afternoon and late afternoon into Georgia. So places like Oxford and Anniston, Alabama, Columbia, Auburn, Alabama, Atlanta, Macon, all those areas are going to be at the risk for widespread severe weather later on today and into this evening, and then spreading east towards Athens and maybe Anderson, South Carolina towards this evening. The threat for intense winds is going to slowly diminish. We still will have a slight risk of severe weather to Augusta and all the way up to very close to Greenville and Rock Hill this evening. The chance for severe weather does diminish some across East Tennessee, so Johnson City, Bristol, as well as all the way over to Greensboro and Asheboro, North Carolina. When you're on the Gulf Coast, you could see some severe weather as well. I would not be shocked if this marginal risk were upgraded to more of a slight risk in places like Mobile and Hattiesburg, Mississippi, maybe even Tallahassee, Florida, but we're going to have to watch as most of the dynamics are going to be off to your north. Zooming in on this, the threat for hail is not super low in Alabama and Georgia, so there could be some hail in the more intense storms as well. Nothing significant. The tornado threat is not super low, but there is some chance, a 5% chance, that we see tornadoes up to as strong as EF1, maybe even EF2 somewhere in here later on if an isolated tornado forms. But I think primarily this is a severe wind, straight line wind likelihood. And the criteria is pretty good, a 30% chance of severe weather wind reports over Alabama and Georgia, and even sneaking into South Carolina this evening. We'll have to watch and see if something more organized goes on, because the Atlanta area could see widespread severe weather and severe winds, maybe even a few gusts over 70 miles per hour, which would be very intense and cause a lot of damage and power outages. So that's what we're looking at here. The lightning tracker, the lightning flash density, you can see there's expected to be quite a bit of lightning from the northern part of the storm, but we start to see things ramping up already at 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern across Mississippi. And as the morning wears on, we start to see that sneaking into Middle Tennessee, Northwest Alabama, all the way to about Huntsville here around 10 a.m., down the Meridian, Mississippi, and a few more storms popping up as well over the Florida parishes of Louisiana into southern Mississippi towards midday. And then in the afternoon, we see a likelihood of intense storms continuing to build up and move across central and eastern Alabama into northwest Georgia and southeast Tennessee. There could also be a second area of thunderstorms behind it that I don't think will produce a lot of severe weather, but could be flashy across middle Tennessee and all the way up into southern Ohio, West Virginia, and even into Pennsylvania. We could have a few isolated rumbles of thunder and a few lightning strikes later this afternoon. And in particular, tonight around 5, 6 o'clock, it's mild enough and it's unstable enough for thunderstorms all the way in the central and eastern Pennsylvania around dark tonight. You can see the area most concentrated with lightning, though, will be Alabama and Georgia. That's our enhanced risk area. Montgomery, Alabama to the eastern parts of Atlanta at 5 o'clock, all the way up to Lake Lanier, and Gainesville, Georgia. As we go to about 6 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock, we see the risk for a lot of lightning advancing into upstate South Carolina. The main line of storms is here, but we also have an area out ahead of it with the possibility of a few supercell storms to the south and east of Macon, Georgia, all the way over to near Augusta, and also an area of some thunderstorms that may pick up a little bit here early tonight over parts of central Virginia and getting to the east of Mount Airy in North Carolina. As we get into tonight, though, you'll see the lightning flashes will still be ongoing until we get to about maybe 9 or 10 o'clock Eastern, and then things start fading before they get to Raleigh-Durham and maybe right around the Triad here. We still see maybe some storms tonight, though, approaching Panama City, Apalachicola, Tallahassee, all the way into central and southern parts of Georgia. We'll look real quick here in the Northeast because I did want to show you guys this. We could have a few lightning strikes all the way to Philly and New York City around 6, 7 o'clock this evening, and maybe a few isolated strikes across southeast New England later on tonight. As we get into the overnight hours, we see some intense storms that could impact the Outer Banks and mainly offshore areas late tonight, first thing tomorrow morning. And we could even have some lightning strikes over on the islands and Cape Cod here tomorrow morning. And believe it or not, possibly some lightning strikes as it's snowing here over the St. Lawrence Valley tomorrow morning and into the afternoon tomorrow. So a very dynamic storm system with a lot of instability. The Supercell Composite Index, and that's what we're watching to see, maybe some supercells which could rotate, and even some bow echoes in parts of a squall line that could produce some more intense winds, is not super low. We do have a decent index building this morning and towards midday in Mississippi and Alabama. As we get on into the afternoon, we see a better chance for supercells from southern Alabama into central and northeast Georgia, and then eventually getting into the upstates of the Carolinas, upstate South Carolina. And I think our maximum time frame for that is 4 and 5 o'clock. You can see indices are relatively high for strong winds and maybe a rotating thunderstorm in upstate South Carolina, as well as back here in eastern Alabama. As we get into tonight, though, the threat still carries on a little bit here south and east of Atlanta, getting into Macon, Covington, Georgia, around 6, 7 o'clock, but then starts to fade as we get to tonight. So I think most of our severe weather is going to be from about late morning in Mississippi and Alabama into early evening in Georgia, South Carolina, maybe even sneaking into North Carolina. The snow part of this storm, we'll see quite a bit of snow in the St. Lawrence Valley, northern New England, potential for a foot of snow. And then we start to see a decent amount of snow in the Smokies and into the Appalachians of West Virginia, amounts of maybe 6 or more inches in the higher elevation. Maybe Clingman's Dome and LeConte will see quite a bit of snow. So that's what I'm watching for you guys. But you'll also see on the GFS, this particular run tries to spit out maybe a coating of snow on the ground late tomorrow night and early on Saturday in eastern North Carolina. So just something I'll be watching for you guys. Not really going to be anything that's going to impact you, and it won't stick around much on Saturday if it does happen. Here's the NAM. If you zoom in, you can see the potential for up to 10 inches of snow up on Clingman's Dome, and maybe 3 to 5 inches on Mitchell and Grandfather Mountain as well. A lot of wind with this storm. You can see when I showed you that upper level chart, I showed you the strong winds coming out of the southwest. We'll see widespread gusts of 40 miles per hour later today and tonight, maybe even 50 miles per hour in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And then up the East Coast, we could get battered here along the Jersey Shore and up into Long Island as we get overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. Wind gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour could occur, and you could have scattered power outages. And then up the Maine seacoast tomorrow, we could have wind gusts of 60 to 70 miles per hour. So mariners, be aware of that threat for severe wind if you're near the waters here on Friday. Temperatures are quite mild this morning. We have 60s and even some 70s expected here. Even to Wilmington will be in the 70s today, 60s in West Virginia, but notice the cold comes in right behind it. Not a major outbreak of cold, but it will definitely turn sharply colder tonight. So we start the evening in the 60s in eastern North Carolina, and then we cool off into the 40s tomorrow evening and even 30s tomorrow night. We'll have 30s all the way down into central Florida on daybreak on Saturday, freezing temperatures to Slidell, Mobile, and Crestview, Florida. And it's going to be a much colder day on Saturday across the east, with daytime temperatures struggling to get past 40 degrees here in the Carolinas. A very chilly day on Saturday. The temperature change is highlighted on the NAM. In 24 hours, we'll see 30 to 35 degree drops this morning over parts of the lower Mississippi Valley, but it'll also warm up quickly here today in the Northeast. 20 to 30 degree temperature rises from this time yesterday, this morning. And you can see a very strong, very sharp difference here in temperatures overnight tonight. Here's your front, and it's a warmer night in Florida, but much colder down south and across the Ohio Valley. So definitely some sharp temperature changes, but nothing like what we saw back around Christmas Eve and the day before, when we had those 50-degree drops in the plains in just a few hours. It'll be much colder on Saturday on the eastern seaboard. Temperatures will be 15, 20 degrees colder, even 30 degrees colder in parts of New York. But we see behind this storm, it's already warming back up in the Great Lakes on Saturday, and that warmth will expand eastward on Sunday back to the eastern seaboard. So the cold will be fleeting. It'll get cold for about 36 hours before temperatures get back to average, if not above, once again. All right, well, a lot for you guys. Again, I'll show you the severe weather chart here, and I think our enhanced chances include Atlanta, Montgomery, and maybe even Birmingham, Alabama later on today. And we could see some stronger storms along the coastal areas and the Outer Banks here of North Carolina later on tonight into tomorrow morning. I will have more for you tomorrow. We're going to talk more about the week ahead in the morning tomorrow, and what's left of this storm system and any snow potential for the East Coast. But if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, you won't miss it that way. And please like this video and share with your friends as well. Really appreciate y'all's time today. I give all the glory to God through my Savior, Jesus Christ. I know that's not everybody's view, but I keep my eyes on the prize. I've been called by God to be a meteorologist. I've been called by God to share weather safety messages with you all, but also to help save lives and to save souls by helping to share my faith with you. And my quick passage today for you is from Hebrews 12, 1 through 3. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And what is being told to us by Paul is simply this: Jesus Christ is the person that we need to fix our eyes on. We need to look to God to answer our prayers. We need to look to Jesus to save us and to give us eternal life. He is the perfecter of faith, not us. The joy before him as he endured the cross. I mean, can you imagine even having joy in seeing such a terrible thing happen, but then realizing that Jesus rose from the dead 3 days later, and we are here on earth, and we are given the ability to accept Jesus Christ so that we can run our race on earth and then have eternal life. And that is a powerful thing. That is the reason that I feel the joy every day in sharing a verse with you. I feel the joy in talking about weather every day. There isn't as much joy as getting up at 5 a.m. every morning when I know I want to sleep a little bit longer. Maybe I need to get to the gym. I've got a full day of work. I've got a family to tend to. There's a lot of sacrifices being made from me and for my family. But the sacrifices are nothing compared to the sacrifice that was ultimately made for all of us, and that is Jesus dying on the cross, rising again, giving us eternal life. This passage just says basically we're surrounded by this cloud of people who saw this happen, of other believers. So let's just push away the sin that easily entangles us and run to God and to run that race that's been marked out for us. God has called us each to do something. God has called us to fix our eyes on Jesus, and it's up to us to remember that and to remember that we're here serving each other. not to divide us, but to bring us all back together. So I could talk a lot more about it. I'm not going to today, but I really appreciate y'all's time. If you have any prayer requests, I am happy to pray for you. Please pray for me as well as I go through the many trials of life and to help this page grow and to help us build a community, not just of people here to watch and learn about the weather, but to pray for each other, because there's nothing wrong with community. I think it's great to be able to do that. So I really appreciate y'all's time, and I wish that you have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you again in the morning. Take care, and God bless you.